When my 2-year relationship ended, I found myself living alone again. I'd been single for a few months and was back on Tinder and all those dating apps. In that time, I met a few people here and there. One of those matches was a girl named Tracy. We connected on Tinder, and she gave me her Snapchat. But things fizzled out pretty quickly. She'd watch my stories but didn't really engage much. Honestly, that sort of thing happened all the time when I was in college. Now, in my late 20s, swiping through dating apps felt a lot different. It was like a reminder of how immature online dating can be. For context, I own a corner townhouse in a little community and work as an accountant. The money's good, but man, is it boring. After my ex moved out, I thought I'd enjoy the privacy and quiet. But after the first month, the novelty wore off. I started realizing that maybe I'm just someone who needs people around. That's probably why I was constantly swiping and setting up dates, just to get out of the house. This was last December. One day, I posted something on my Snapchat story about Christmas. Out of nowhere, Tracy commented on it. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks, but she struck up a conversation about doing some Christmas-themed activities together. From there, we started chatting again. I suggested some festive ideas like ice skating or checking out the Christmas village decorations, but she had another idea, decorating my Christmas tree. Now, I did have a fake tree, but it was still up in the attic. I told her I hadn't put it up yet because it's a 2-person job getting it down. She offered to come over and help. I figured, why not? We made plans for her to come by around 9 o'clock that night. By the time we'd set the plan, it was already dark, probably around 7:30. I remember rushing out the door, grabbing my keys, and heading to the liquor store to pick up a couple of bottles of wine. When I got back, I vacuumed and swept the floors. It hit me how quickly the place could get messy now that my ex wasn't around to help clean. By 9 o'clock, I was sitting upright on the couch, trying to look casual with the TV on. I had everything set up to feel cozy and relaxing, but I was low-key anxious. I sent her a follow-up message, asking her to let me know when she was on her way. After sitting there for a while, I started thinking she might flake. Finally, around 9:30, she messaged that she was outside. When Tracy walked in, I was surprised. I had to look up at her. She was taller than me by a couple of inches, and I'm 5 feet 10 inches, so she must have been at least 6 feet tall. The first thing I noticed was the overwhelming smell of her perfume, like she'd practically bathed in it. We went straight to the couch, and she sat really close. Our legs were touching. At that point, I started feeling a little confused. She looked older than her photos, and there was something slightly rough about her appearance that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Beneath the strong perfume, I caught a faint whiff of body odor, which was honestly a bit of a turnoff. Trying to keep things light, I asked if she wanted some wine. She said yes, so I poured us both a glass. As we sat there talking, I started feeling like she wasn't anything like I'd imagined from our chats. It was one of those moments where you meet someone you've been messaging, and they end up being completely different from the version you'd built in your head. I handed her a glass of Merlot, and we clinked glasses to toast. No sooner had we done that than she managed to spill a big drop of red wine on my light blue couch. I wanted to scream but held it together. I told her, it's okay. Even though I was fuming inside, I rushed to the kitchen and grabbed a damp paper towel and a sponge. As soon as I got back to the couch, I started blotting the wine stain as fast as I could, hoping to stop it from setting. Tracy kept apologizing over and over, and I kept telling her it was fine, though I could feel the tension rising. To break the awkwardness, I suggested getting the Christmas tree out of the attic. I climbed up into the attic and slid over the big box with all the tree parts. Piece by piece, I handed them down to her. Each one was larger than the last until I got to the biggest section. It was so big that I couldn't manage it on my own while climbing down the ladder. Tracy grabbed it with ease, and I had to remind myself just how tall and strong she was. Once everything was downstairs, I climbed down, and we started putting the tree together in the living room, With Christmas music playing in the background, I poured Tracy another glass of wine and helped myself to a bit more, too. The wine helped me relax. It always does. By the time we had the tree assembled, it was time to move on to the ornaments. I told her my ornaments were in the crawl space and explained they were from my childhood. My parents had given me several bins full of Christmas decorations. While Tracy stayed in the living room to unwind, I went down to the crawl space to start bringing up the bins. As I was lugging the first one up the stairs, I began to feel lightheaded. It hit me hard, like the wine was really getting to me. I'm not a heavy drinker and have a low tolerance, but this was different. I knew I hadn't had enough to feel this way. By the time I made it to the top of the stairs, Tracy wasn't in the living room. I figured she'd gone to the bathroom, so I called out her name. When I didn't get an answer, I walked around the house, checking every room. The bathroom was empty. I kept calling her name, feeling more and more confused. I even sent her a message on Snapchat, but she never opened it. I checked the bedrooms, but she wasn't there either. That's when it hit me. She'd snuck out. I couldn't believe it. Did she think I was weird? Ugly? The strange part was that I wasn't even that into her, but it still stung. Feeling defeated, I flopped onto the couch. For some reason, it felt way more comfortable than before. I spent the next little while alternating between checking my phone to see if she'd opened my Snap and absent-mindedly watching TV. At some point, everything just went black. My memory cut out entirely. When I came to, it was pitch dark. The TV and lights were off, and I was still on the couch. I could hear faint noises around me, and my whole body felt weak, like I couldn't move my limbs properly. I managed to fumble around and find my phone, which had somehow ended up beneath me. The moment the screen lit up, I froze. The glow from my phone revealed the outline of a tall figure standing right in front of me. I didn't scream. Somehow, I just couldn't. I lowered my phone, plunging the room back into darkness, and whispered, "Tracy?" I wasn't fully remembering what had happened earlier, but part of me hoped it was her. There was no reply. My heart was pounding. I slowly lifted my phone again and turned on the flashlight. When the beam landed on the figure, I saw it was, in fact, Tracy. She was standing there, staring down at me, completely still that I felt paralyzed. Whether from fear or whatever she'd obviously drugged me with, I couldn't tell. My limbs were weak, and I could barely speak. All I managed to say was her name, Tracy, a couple of times. She didn't respond. Instead, she suddenly turned toward the stairs and sprinted down them. Her footsteps were thunderous, each one echoing through the house. I heard a loud slam from downstairs, probably the front door, but I couldn't be sure. Everything felt surreal and disjointed in those moments after I woke up. With each passing minute, though, I started feeling more clear-headed, and my ability to move gradually returned. I grabbed my phone again and checked Snapchat. Her account was gone. She'd blocked me. I got up and looked outside. There were no cars, just my own and the neighbors'. That's when it hit me. I never even noticed what vehicle she arrived in. Or if she had one at all. I went through the house, checking every room to see if anything was stolen. What I found missing was bizarre, but started to make sense soon after. Every single bottle of pills in the house was gone. Vitamins, supplements, my Adderall, even a bottle of Oxy I'd been prescribed. It had all vanished. I'd had the Oxy since my surgery, but I'd barely touched the bottle. That was in the drawer by my bed, and it was gone. I also noticed a bottle of vodka missing from the mini fridge in my room. Other than that, nothing else seemed stolen, but I still called the police right away to report the robbery. When they arrived, I explained everything, her Snapchat username, how I never got her number, and that all I knew was the name she gave me, Tracy Gibson. They seemed skeptical, but they went through the motions. They knocked on my neighbor's door, even though it was 1 a.m., with me standing there next to them. My neighbor said he hadn't seen or heard anything strange since he'd been asleep. After about 20 minutes, the cops left. I checked to make sure all my keys were still where they should be, just to be certain she couldn't get back in. Beyond that, this Tracy person had vanished without a trace. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. Her whole vibe had been off from the moment I met her. I don't even call this a theory anymore. I know the truth. Tracy wasn't who she claimed to be. I think she was older than she said, probably homeless, and definitely struggling with a drug addiction. Now it makes sense. The overwhelming perfume was likely meant to mask her body odor, which still managed to come through. She must have spiked my wine while I was in the attic. I don't know how long I was out, but it was enough time for her to scour my house and take every pill and supplement I owned. The image of her silhouette standing over me when I woke up on the couch still gives me chills. After that night, I didn't even bother decorating the tree. Now, here's where the story gets strange again. What I'm about to tell you happened years earlier, back in 1997. On Christmas Eve, I was 7 at the time. And since we're Jewish, we didn't celebrate Christmas. Christmas Eve was just a regular night for us. Our dad, being a doctor, always worked on call at the hospital during the holidays. That night, it was just my little sister and me at home. Technically, our mom was there too, but to be blunt, she was an alcoholic. As a 7-year-old, I didn't understand what alcoholism was. All I knew was that once it got dark, my mom would be passed out, and nothing could wake her up. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh or like too much information, but it's important to what happened. My sister and I were downstairs watching TV when we heard a knock at the door. Being the older sibling, I got up to check. Our front door had glass panes, so I could see who was on the other side. It was a man in a Santa suit holding a big bag. When he saw me, he smiled and waved, motioning for me to come closer. I didn't open the door but stood close enough to talk to him. I thought it was strange that someone dressed like Santa would come to our house, of all places in the neighborhood. He said, "Hey kid, it's me, Santa. Let me in, and I'll give you your presents." I remember staring at him and bluntly saying, "Santa isn't real. And even if you were, you wouldn't give presents to Jewish kids anyway." His smile faltered for a moment, but then he chuckled and said, "Of course I'm real. And I used to only visit Christian homes, but lately, I felt bad that Jewish kids never get any presents. So this year, I decided to change the rules. I've got presents for you, too." I wasn't buying it. I crossed my arms and snapped, "Jewish kids get presents. We just get them during Hanukkah, not Christmas." That's when his whole demeanor shifted. The cheerful act disappeared, and his smile turned into an angry scowl. "Open the door," he demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. I panicked and shouted for my sister to call 911. As soon as I said that, the man took off running. We both watched as he disappeared into the night. We did call the cops, but the operator didn't seem to take us seriously. Looking back, I think she thought we were just a couple of excited kids pretending Santa was at our house. She told us this number was for emergencies only and hung up. I was terrified. My sister and I didn't know who else to call. I was only 7, and she was 4. The only numbers we knew were our home phone and 911. This was the 90s, so my dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and I had no idea how to reach him at the hospital. With our mom passed out and impossible to wake, we were completely on our own. We prayed the man wouldn't come back, but just a few minutes later, he was knocking again. This time, he said he knew the cops weren't coming. "Let me in," he threatened, "or you'll be in big trouble." My sister started crying and ran upstairs to try to wake Mom. I didn't know what to do, so I came up with the only plan that made sense to my 7-year-old brain. I grabbed a bunch of candles we kept for our menorah, lit them all, and then ran underneath the smoke detector. One by one, I blew out the candles, tossing them up so the smoke would set off the alarm. As an adult, I cringe at how reckless that was. I could have accidentally started a fire, but back then, I didn't think about the danger. All I knew was that the smoke alarm would automatically alert the fire department. Luckily, it worked. The fire station was only 2 minutes away, and they arrived fast. My sister came downstairs, terrified of the alarm, but I assured her there wasn't a fire. "Don't go outside," I told her. "Stay here with me." To my shock, the man outside didn't leave. Instead, he ran up to the firefighters, waving them down and pretending to be relieved. I heard him say, "Thank God you're here. I'm their dad. I dressed as Santa to surprise them for Christmas Eve. My suit doesn't have pockets, so I left my keys inside. The door's locked, and I can't get to my kids." The firefighters seemed to believe him at first. One of them told us to stand back because they were about to break down the door. We started screaming, crying, and shouting through the door. "He's not our dad. Our dad's at the hospital. We don't even celebrate Christmas." That stopped the firefighter who was about to break in. He looked confused and asked, "You don't celebrate Christmas?" "No," I cried, showing him my kippah and pointing to our menorah. Sobbing, I explained that I'd set off the smoke alarm because the police wouldn't believe us, and we needed help. "Please don't let him in." The firefighter's expression changed. He turned to the man and asked, "Why would Santa Claus come to a Jewish house?" I don't remember exactly what the man said, but the firefighters weren't buying it anymore. Two of them wrestled him to the ground while another called the police. After the man was subdued, one firefighter asked where my dad worked so they could contact him. When the police arrived, they arrested the man. An officer stayed with us until Dad got home. When Dad arrived, he was furious. He tore into Mom for being wasted and sleeping through the entire ordeal. But mostly, he was relieved that we were okay as far as Christmases go. I was more than happy to have a boring, quiet one the following year. To this day, I think being Jewish saved our lives. If we had opened that door, I doubt we would have lived to see another Hanukkah. Fast forward to December 2022. My girlfriend Charlotte and I were driving to the Pocono Mountains. We'd rented a cozy Airbnb decked out with Christmas decorations, complete with a big property, a beautiful view, and a charming village nearby. There was a snowstorm forecasted that night, so we hit the road earlier than planned to give ourselves time to get groceries and settle in. The drive from the city to the Poconos was about 4 hours, and we made good time. Along the way, we stopped at a Family Dollar to grab some snacks and groceries. Then, we headed straight for the Airbnb.as. We turned onto the uphill driveway, the gravel driveway, cut through a clearing in the trees, leading up to the property. The house was surrounded by woods, with a big deck that had a hot tub on it, a feature we were especially excited about. The thought of sitting in it during a snowstorm sounded perfect. The property was decked out with Christmas decorations, light-up reindeer, a big snowman, and oversized candy canes lining the walkway to the front deck. It was charming and festive, just what Charlotte and I had been hoping for. We made a few trips back and forth from the car to unload everything. Our first impression was that the place felt cozy, just like it had in the pictures. There was a Christmas tree in one corner, stockings hung on the walls, and smaller decorations scattered throughout the house. The warm, woody smell reminded me of a log cabin, though the house itself was more like a standard home. Then I noticed the stack of logs next to a big fireplace in the living room, and it all made sense. The house had 3 bedrooms, though we only needed one. We set our luggage in the second bedroom and started getting settled. I checked out the basics, the fridge, the TV, to see if it had cable or Netflix, and the views from the windows. Upstairs, there was a loft with a pool table and a couple of couches. The basement, however, was dark and cold, with an entirely different vibe. It felt more like a laundry room or workshop than a part of the home meant for hanging out. As I was finishing up in the basement, there was a knock at the front door. I hurried upstairs to answer it. Standing there was a man who looked like he was in his late 40s. He wore gray sweatpants and a worn, yellowish-brown jacket with rips in it. He smiled and asked, "How are you folks doing?" I replied, "Good," and asked if he was the Airbnb host. He said he wasn't, but that he and his brother ran the place. His name was Tom, and he mentioned that he lived just up the road. If you or your girl need anything, just let me know, he added. I thanked him, but I found it odd that he already knew about Charlotte. She hadn't come to the door, so I figured maybe his brother, Mike, the host, had told him about us when we booked. By the time Tom left, it was pitch black outside, and the snow was coming down hard. We cranked up the heat and started preparing dinner. Chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. It was a bit of a random assortment, but it worked. We ate on the couch with the Christmas tree lights glowing in the corner, giving the room a cozy, festive feel. We turned on the Polar Express, the only good Christmas movie we could find on the streaming platforms. If you couldn't tell, we're huge Christmas fans. After the movie, once we digested our food, we decided it was hot tub time. I turned on all the Christmas lights and decorations outside, and we climbed into the hot tub as the snow fell around us. It was pure bliss. The warm water, the cold air, the festive lights, it was perfect. But then, the bubbles stopped. The hot tub fell silent, and we heard unmistakable footsteps somewhere on the property. Charlotte and I froze, staring at each other. Should I call out? I whispered. No, she said firmly, shaking her head. The footsteps moved further away, eventually fading into the distance. Probably just a deer, I said, trying to reassure her, and maybe myself, but deep down, I knew those weren't animal footsteps. After a while, we went inside to shower before bed. The hot water didn't last more than 2 minutes before turning ice cold. We both screamed and jumped out of the shower. Shivering, I messaged Mike, the Airbnb host, about the issue. He responded within half an hour, apologizing and saying he'd send someone to look at the water heater the next day. We went to bed after our half shower, still feeling uneasy. In the middle of the night, we were jolted awake by loud, aggressive bangs on the front door. Charlotte shook me, her face pale with fear. Don't go check, she whispered. Just stay in bed. Don't make a sound. Honestly, I was glad she said that. No part of me wanted to see who was banging on the door in the middle of the night. There were 3 sets of bangs, each one louder and angrier than the last. Then, silence. We sat upright in bed, whispering to each other in the dark. I eventually got up and locked the bedroom door for extra security. The minutes dragged on, but after half an hour of tense silence, we finally drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I messaged Mike again about the banging. This time, he responded quickly, sounding as confused as we were. That's really strange, he wrote. I don't know why anyone would be out there that late. If it happens again, you should definitely call the police. Not the most reassuring response, but he wasn't wrong. What else could he say? Later, I went outside to wipe the snow off my Jeep. As I worked, I noticed footprints in the snow. They looped around the house, and my mind immediately went to the knocks from the night before. Were these the same person's footprints? But then I realized something. It had snowed all night. Any footprints from last night should have been covered. As I stood there, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me as I wiped the snow off my Jeep. I saw Tom walking around from the other side of my car. Surprised, I greeted him and mentioned the hot water heater problem. I told him Mike had said someone was supposed to come by and take a look at it. Tom nodded and said, Yeah, I know. I'm here to check it out. I also brought up the knocks on the door from the night before and showed him the footprints in the snow. He studied them for a moment, then said, There are a lot of strange folks out here who snoop around at night. That made me uneasy. I asked if we should avoid using the hot tub at night, just to be safe. He shook his head. No, that shouldn't be a problem. The people around here are harmless. Tom headed into the house and wandered around for a bit before going down to the basement. I'll take a look at the hot water heater, he said. Something about Tom felt off. As he was downstairs, I decided to message Mike. Tom's here now, checking out the water heater, I wrote. Mike replied quickly. Is Tom the name of the plumber? Confused, I typed back, no, your brother. There was a long pause before Mike replied again. What do you mean? I don't have a brother. My stomach dropped. I stood there, staring at my phone as the realization hit me. I responded, you don't have a brother named Tom? He said he runs the Airbnb with you. Mike's reply was immediate. No. Who is this person? Panic set in. I rushed to find Charlotte, whispering, pack your things. Quietly. We're leaving. Now. We grabbed everything we could in one trip, tossing it all into the car. I didn't care if we left behind something small like a charger. We just needed to get out of there. As I started the Jeep, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Tom walking quickly toward the back of the car. Without hesitation, I threw it into drive and sped out of there as fast as I could. Once we were back on the main road, I called Mike. Breathless, I explained everything about Tom, the hot tub, the banging on the door, the footprints, and how he'd been in the house. I told Mike he needed to call the police immediately. Mike didn't stay on the line long, but about 20 minutes later, he called us back. By then, Charlotte and I were still driving aimlessly, trying to calm down. Mike told us the police had gone to the house but didn't find anyone there. He was on his way to the property himself to check things out, but mostly wanted more details from us. We spent the next few hours driving around the area, trying to shake the unnerving feeling. Eventually, we headed home. Later that night, Mike messaged me again. He apologized profusely and said he had no idea who Tom could have been. He didn't know anyone matching my description of the man, and no one should have had access to the property. What truly disturbs me is the thought of that man watching us the entire time. From the moment we arrived to when we were in the hot tub, he must have been the one banging on the door in the middle of the night. That I shudder to think what his intentions were. But whatever they might have been, I'm just thankful we trusted our instincts and got out of there when we did.